"Stay there inside the pit." The words landed like a slap. Lewis blinked hard, mud water dripping from his eyebrows. His brown coat, neatly pressed just 20 minutes ago, was now heavy, dark, and stuck to his chest. His walking stick floated beside him like a sad joke. Above the pit, a young man in a black suit stood with one foot close to the edge, smirking. He pointed down at Lewis the way people point at something they don't respect. "Next time," the man said, a voice loud enough for the passing cars to hear, "you will look very well and always stop for others to pass." Lewis's hand shook as he tried to lift himself. His fingers slipped on the wet concrete. The pit was not deep like a well, but deep enough to trap an old man who had weak knees and a sore back. A Danfo bus roared past on the tarred road, spraying dust into the bright Lagos afternoon. A woman selling pure water paused, her sachets shining in the sun. Two teenage boys stopped, eyes wide, but nobody moved fast enough. Then a car door slammed somewhere behind the crowd. Boots hit the ground, quick, urgent steps. A man in a military captain's uniform pushed through, shoulders tight, face sharp with shock and disbelief. He didn't even look at the smirking bully first. His eyes locked on the old man in the pit. And Lewis looked up. His lips trembled. "Noah?" The captain froze. For half a second his face went blank. Like his brain refused to accept what he was seeing. Then his voice cracked, just a little. "Dad." And in that moment the bully's smirk wavered. Because the captain wasn't just any officer rushing to help. He was Lewis's son. And he had just seen his own father being bullied in public. Noah's hand slid toward his phone. He didn't shout, he didn't argue, he didn't beg. He simply stared at the man in the black suit and reached for the one thing that could change everything. But before Noah could press call, Johnson leaned closer to the pit and laughed. Earlier that day, Lagos was doing what Lagos always does, moving like it had no patience. The sun was bright and hard, the air smelled like fuel, roasted corn and warm asphalt. On the road near Ikeja, cars fought for space, drivers honked like horns were magic. Lewis stood at the edge of the pedestrian path, holding his walking stick the way a careful man holds something important. He was 75, dark-skinned and tall in the quiet way old soldiers can be tall, even when their bodies are tired. His brown coat looked too warm for the heat, but he wore it anyway. It made him feel complete, as he liked to say. Under the coat, his shirt was tucked in neatly, his shoes were polished. Even his grey hair was combed back with care. He had that kind of face that made people guess he was once very strong. He didn't look rich. He didn't look like a man with power. He looked like someone's grandfather who kept his promises. Lewis wasn't in a hurry. He never rushed in Lagos, not anymore. "Slow and steady," he murmured to himself. "That is how you live long." He was trying to cross to the other side of the road, toward a small pharmacy near Allen Avenue, when he noticed something that made him stop. A black SUV had blocked the side lane like it owned the street. And in front of it stood Johnson. Other people in Ikeja knew the name, even if they didn't know the face. Johnson was a young CEO who loved the sound of his own voice. He wore suits that looked expensive and smiles that looked cold. He was 30, dark-skinned and slim in a sharp, confident way. His hair was cut clean, his shoes always shined, and he carried himself like the whole world should step aside when he arrived. That day he was in a bad mood. Two men in corporate suits stood beside him. Staff, maybe assistants. One held a laptop bag. The other held a file. Johnson's face was tight, like he was chewing anger. "Do you know who I am?" Johnson snapped at a commercial bus driver who had tried to squeeze past. "You people have no sense, no order, no brain." The bus driver raised both hands. "Ogre, sorry, traffic, shut up," Johnson cut in. Lewis watched for a moment. His mouth tightened. He didn't like the way Johnson spoke. It wasn't just harsh, it was cruel. Like Johnson enjoyed making people feel small. Lewis looked away. He had learned something in life. Some fights are not for fists. Some fights are for wisdom. He waited for a safe moment to cross. But Lagos didn't give safe moments easily. A car tried to turn. A bike sped past. Someone yelled, "Hold your side." Lewis stepped forward carefully, one foot, then the walking stick, then the other foot. That was when Johnson turned, and his eyes landed on Lewis, not with kindness, and not with patience, with irritation. "Old man," Johnson barked, "are you blind? Move." Lewis paused, surprised by the disrespect. He wasn't in Johnson's way. He was simply crossing like everyone else. Lewis swallowed, kept his voice calm. "Young man, please, let me pass. I will be quick." Johnson let out a laugh that had no joy in it. "Let you pass?" he repeated. "Look at you. You're blocking the whole road with that stick." Lewis glanced around. A few people had slowed down to watch. Lagos loved a small drama. Lewis felt heat rise to his cheeks, not because he was ashamed, but because the insult was sharp. "I am not blocking the road," Lewis said. "You can pass. I am almost across." Johnson stepped closer, and now Lewis noticed something else. Johnson wasn't angry because of traffic. He was angry because someone didn't jump out of his way fast enough. That was different. That was pride. "That's the problem," Johnson said, pointing a finger. "You old people. You feel the road belongs to you. Always slow, always stubborn." Lewis's throat tightened. He wanted to walk away, but the words, the disrespect, it pulled at something inside him. "Son," Lewis said quietly, "respect is free. You don't have to buy it." Johnson's eyes narrowed. The crowd made a small sound, like "ah," the way people react when someone finally speaks truth. Johnson's staff shifted uncomfortably. One of them whispered, "Sir, let's just go." But Johnson's pride didn't like being corrected, not in front of people, not by an old man. Johnson leaned in, his voice low, dangerous. "You want to teach me manners?" Lewis held his walking stick tighter, but he didn't raise it. He wasn't threatening anyone. His hands were simply steadying his body. "I am only saying the truth," Lewis replied. "Truth does not fear age." Johnson's face changed. The smirk arrived like a shadow, and Lewis felt it in his bones. This young man is not normal. He wants to hurt somebody today. "Move," Johnson said again, louder. "Move now." Lewis took another careful step, then another. He was almost past Johnson. Almost. And that's when Johnson did it. Not a slap, not a punch, something more cowardly. Johnson shoved him. Hard. It happened fast. 1 second Lewis was upright, the next second his foot slipped near the side gutter, and his body tilted. Where Lewis tried to catch himself with the walking stick, but the stick hit the ground wrong and slid. His arms flailed. The world spun. Then, splash. Lewis landed inside a small roadside pit filled with dirty mud water. The splash leaped up like it wanted to embarrass him even more. For a moment, there was silence. Then people screamed. "Oh my God! Jesus! Old man!" Lewis coughed, sputtering. Mud water clung to his face, his ears, the front of his coat. He tried to stand. But the pit walls were slippery. His knees shook. Johnson stared down at him and smiled. That's when he pointed. That's when he said it. "Stay there inside the pit." And that was the moment our story truly began. Some people moved forward, like they wanted to help. But they hesitated, because Johnson had the kind of confidence that made people afraid. He looked like someone who could make one phone call and ruin your life. A woman in a yellow blouse covered her mouth. "Ah, why would you do that?" Johnson glanced at her like she was a fly. "Mind your business." The woman stepped back immediately. A young man in slippers took one step forward. "Oga, leave na old man." Johnson's head turned slowly. "Do you want to join him?" The young man swallowed and stepped back too. Lewis's hand shook as he tried again to climb. His fingers found a small edge on the concrete, but he couldn't pull his weight up. His coat dragged him down, and the mud made everything slippery. He blinked hard. He hated the feeling, helpless, exposed, watched. This wasn't the first hardship in Lewis's life. But this one was public, and Johnson enjoyed it. "Next time you will look very well," Johnson said again, louder now, like he was teaching a lesson. "And always stop for others to pass." Lewis tried to speak but coughed. His voice came out broken. "Please, help me." Johnson laughed. It wasn't a big laugh. It was small and mean, like a nail scratching a plate. Then the sound of boots came closer, fast, urgent. A voice shouted from behind the crowd, "Shift! Move!" People turned, and that was when Noah arrived. Noah was in uniform, but he didn't look like he came for attention. He looked like he came because his body moved before his mind finished thinking. He was 38, dark-skinned, built strong, with a face that could be calm or terrifying depending on the moment. And his eyes scanned the scene quickly. The crowd, the pit, the old man struggling, the young man pointing and smirking. Noah's jaw tightened. His first reaction was pure instinct. Rescue. He stepped forward, but then he saw Lewis's face, mud-stained, shocked, humiliated. And then Lewis looked up. Noah? That single word struck Noah like thunder. Noah's body went still. His eyes widened. He leaned forward slowly, like he was afraid the old man would disappear if he blinked. "Oh, Dad," he whispered. The crowd made a soft sound, confusion, surprise. Johnson's smirk flickered again. Lewis tried to lift his arm, but it shook. "My son." Noah's throat tightened. He swallowed hard. For one tiny second, he looked like a child again, like a boy who once ran to his father for safety. Then his face changed. Not rage like shouting, not rage like fighting, a colder kind of anger. Controlled, focused, the kind of anger that does not waste time with noise. Noah took a breath. He turned his head and looked at Johnson. Johnson lifted his chin like he was proud, like he wanted this moment. "So," Johnson said, "you know him?" Noah didn't answer. Noah's hand went into his pocket. He pulled out his phone. Johnson chuckled. "Go ahead. Call whoever you want." Noah's eyes didn't leave Johnson's face. "I will." Lewis tried to move again, but he slipped. His hand splashed back into the mudwater. He made a small sound, pain mixed with shame. And that sound did something to Noah. Noah crouched near the edge of the pit, not climbing in yet. His voice softened for his father, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Daddy," Noah said quietly, "don't move. Please, just don't move." Lewis blinked. "Noah, I said don't move," Noah repeated, gentle but firm, like a command that also sounded like love. Then Noah lifted the phone. He didn't call his friends. He didn't call his colleagues. And he didn't call for connections. He pressed record first. The camera caught Johnson's face clearly, the black suit, the pointing hand, the smug mouth. Johnson saw the phone and laughed. "You're filming?" "For what?" Noah's voice was low. "Say it again." Johnson's smile grew. He pointed down at Lewis again, performing for the camera now. "Stay there inside the pit," Johnson said, slow and proud. "Next time you will look very well and always stop for others to pass." The crowd murmured. And someone whispered, "Ah, this is bad." Noah ended the recording, then he opened his contacts and tapped a name. Johnson leaned closer, trying to see. "Who are you calling, Captain?" Noah finally spoke to him directly. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. "The police." Johnson's laughter burst out. "Police? For what? This old man fell. He should watch where he's going." Noah didn't argue. He put the phone to his ear, and as it rang, Noah's eyes stayed on Johnson, steady, eye unblinking, like a door had closed inside him. Like whatever happened next, Johnson would not be able to talk his way out. Lewis looked up at his son, mud dripping from his chin. His voice was small. "Noah, please, don't make trouble." Noah's eyes softened for 1 second. Then the call connected. Noah spoke into the phone, his words clear and clipped. "Yes, Ikeja. Along the tarred road near Allen, an elderly man has been assaulted and pushed into a roadside pit. I have video evidence. Please come now." Johnson's smile began to fade, because Noah wasn't begging. He wasn't bluffing. He sounded like a man who already decided the ending. Noah lowered the phone, and finally, he reached toward the pit, preparing to pull his father out. But before Noah could grab Lewis's hand, Johnson stepped forward suddenly, his voice sharpened. "You're making a mistake," Johnson warned. "Do you know who you're dealing with?" Noah paused. Slowly, he looked up at Johnson, and Noah's expression did not change, not even a little. He just said, "Step back." Johnson didn't. He stepped closer, and the crowd held its breath, because the next move could turn this shame into something worse. And Lewis, still trapped in the mud water, could only watch, helpless. As two worlds collided above him, Noah's fingers tightened around the edge of the pit, and Johnson lifted his hand again like he wanted to push someone else. Johnson's hand hovered in the air. For one dangerous second, it looked like he might push Noah too. The crowd gasped. Noah did not move. He didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He simply stared at Johnson's raised hand, then at Johnson's eyes. "Try it," Noah said quietly. Just two words, but they carried something heavy. Johnson hesitated. Well, because this was no longer an old man he could bully. This was a trained military captain standing inches away. And the calm in Noah's voice was more frightening than anger. Johnson slowly lowered his hand. The crowd released a soft breath. Noah bent down immediately and reached into the pit. "Dad, give me your hand." Lewis tried, but his fingers were slippery and shaking. Mud clung to his palms. His walking stick floated near his elbow. "I'm sorry," Lewis whispered, his voice breaking. "I should have just stayed quiet." Noah's jaw tightened. "You have nothing to be sorry for." He stepped carefully into the shallow side of the pit, ignoring the dirty water soaking into his polished boots. He grabbed his father firmly under the arms. The mud made it hard. Lewis's coat was heavy, like it carried shame inside it. But Noah lifted him, slow, steady, like a soldier carrying someone wounded in battle. And the crowd clapped softly when Lewis finally stood upright outside the pit. Lewis swayed. Noah held him tight. Johnson rolled his eyes. "Drama," he muttered. Noah heard it. He looked at Johnson again, this time longer. "You pushed him," Noah said. Johnson shrugged. "He fell." "You pushed him," Noah repeated. "And what if I did?" Johnson snapped. "He should have moved. The world doesn't stop because someone is old." The words hung in the hot Lagos air. Lewis's shoulders sank a little. "The world doesn't stop because someone is old." That sentence cut deeper than the fall. Noah turned slightly toward his father. He wiped mud gently from Lewis's face with his handkerchief. "You served this country," Noah said softly. "You deserve respect." Johnson laughed again. "Served? Served how?" "Selling groundnuts." Noah's eyes darkened. "My father," he said calmly, "is a retired army veteran." The crowd went quiet. A woman whispered, "Veteran." Johnson blinked once. Then he forced another smirk. "So what? That makes him untouchable." Before Noah could answer, a police siren echoed faintly from the distance. Johnson's head turned. Two police vehicles were pushing through traffic. Johnson's assistants exchanged nervous looks. "Sir," one of them whispered, "maybe we should just go." Johnson straightened his jacket. "Relax. I know people." The police cars stopped near the roadside. Officers stepped out quickly. One of them, a tall officer with sharp eyes, walked straight toward Noah. "Captain," he said respectfully, "we got your call." Johnson's smirk finally disappeared. "Captain," the word hit him differently now. Noah nodded once. "Yes, officer, this man pushed my father into that pit." The officer turned to Johnson. "Sir, is this true?" Johnson scoffed. "This is ridiculous." The old man slipped. Noah held up his phone. "I recorded him." He played the video. The screen showed Johnson's face clearly. The pointing finger, the smirk, and the words, "Stay there inside the pit." The officer's expression hardened. He replayed it. Johnson swallowed. "That video doesn't show me pushing him," Johnson argued quickly. "It only shows what I said after." A few people from the crowd stepped forward. "I saw him push the old man," one woman said. "Yes, he pushed him," a bus driver added. Johnson's assistants stepped back, distancing themselves like smoke drifting away from fire. The officer looked at Johnson carefully. "Sir, please come with us." Johnson's eyes widened. "Are you joking? Do you know who I am?" The officer's voice remained calm. "You can explain that at the station." Johnson turned to Noah. "This is unnecessary." Noah didn't respond. He was focused on his father, who was now sitting on a low concrete block, breathing heavily. Lewis looked tired, not just from the fall, from the humiliation. "Please," Lewis whispered to Noah, "or let it go." Noah crouched in front of him. His voice softened again. "Dad, if I let it go, he will do it to someone else tomorrow." Lewis's eyes filled with tears he didn't want to show. He nodded slowly. Johnson was handcuffed. The metal clicked loudly. For the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. "You're making a mistake," he told the officer. "My investors will hear about this." The officer replied calmly, "Then they will." And Johnson was led into the police vehicle. The station smelled like old paper and dust. Johnson sat in a small office, his expensive black suit now wrinkled. The confidence that once filled him had thinned. Across from him sat the investigating officer. "So," the officer began, flipping through notes, "you pushed a 75-year-old retired veteran into a roadside pit." Johnson leaned forward. "I told you, he fell." The officer played the video again, the smirk, the words. Johnson looked away. Do you know who he is?" the officer asked. Johnson rolled his eyes. "Some old man." The officer's tone sharpened. "Louis Adeyemi, retired Army sergeant, served during internal operations in the North, injured twice in service, received commendation." Johnson's lips parted slightly. "And his son," the officer continued, "Captain Noah Adeyemi, active duty." Johnson's breathing changed. The room suddenly felt smaller. "Why does that matter?" Johnson asked, as though his voice had lost its edge. "It matters," the officer said quietly, "because you chose the wrong man to humiliate." Johnson laughed nervously. "So this is about revenge?" The officer leaned back. "No, this is about assault." Outside the office, Noah stood near a window, watching quietly. Louis sat beside him, wrapped now in a clean cloth someone had brought. He looked smaller under the fluorescent light. "Daddy," Noah said gently, "do you want to go home?" Louis hesitated, and then he shook his head. "I want to see this through." Noah studied his father's face. There was something new there. Not anger, not pride, resolve. Louis had been silent his whole life about disrespect. He had endured things, swallowed insults. But today, something had changed. Inside the office, Johnson's phone buzzed. One of his investors was calling, then another, then another. The officer looked at the screen. "You may want to answer." Johnson grabbed it quickly. "Hello?" "Yes." "Yes. I'm at the station, but it's a misunderstanding." His face slowly drained of color as he listened. "What? Who told you that?" Pause. "No, I didn't assault anyone." Another pause. His voice cracked slightly. "We can still finalize the deal." The line went dead. Johnson stared at the phone. The officer watched him quietly. "This isn't over," Johnson muttered. The officer nodded. "You're right. It's just beginning." Hours passed. Statements were taken. Witnesses signed documents. The video was copied officially. Johnson sat alone in a holding cell. The metal bench felt cold under him. For the first time that day, he wasn't performing for anyone. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't shouting. He replayed the moment in his head. The push, the splash, the smirk. He remembered saying, "Stay there inside the pit." He had meant it as a joke, a power move, a small reminder of who he believed he was. But now the words echoed differently. They sounded ugly. From outside the cell, he heard voices. "The case will move to court." Assault of an elderly veteran. Video evidence. Johnson swallowed. Court, this was not supposed to go this far. He had always believed money could smooth things. Connections could silence things. But Captain Noah had not shouted. He had not fought. He had simply recorded and called. Simple actions, heavy consequences. Later that night, Noah stood outside the station with his father, and the streetlights glowed softly over Ikeja. Louis leaned slightly on his walking stick again. "Are you okay?" Noah asked. Louis nodded slowly. "I've faced worse," he said quietly. Noah looked at him carefully. "But this one hurt differently." Louis didn't answer immediately. Cars passed. A light breeze moved through the trees. Finally, Louis spoke. "War teaches you to expect enemies," he said softly. "But disrespect from your own people, that is harder." Noah's hands tightened at his sides. "I won't let it slide." Louis looked at his son. "Make sure you're doing this for justice," he said. "Not anger." Noah paused. Then he nodded. "For justice." Behind them, inside the station, Johnson was being officially charged. The officer closed the file with a firm snap. "Court date confirmed." Johnson looked up slowly, and for the first time since that afternoon, he felt the ground beneath his life begin to shift, because the pit he had laughed at was no longer the only pit in this story. Johnson did not sleep that night. The metal bench inside the holding cell was cold, but that was not what kept him awake. It was silence, no assistants, no drivers, no security escorts opening doors for him. Just silence, and the memory of an old man falling into muddy water. He closed his eyes. The splash replayed again. Then the words, "Stay there inside the pit." He opened his eyes quickly. For the first time in many years, Johnson felt something unfamiliar pressing against his chest. Not anger, not pride. Fear. By sunrise, Lagos had already moved on to another busy day. But the internet had not. A young roadside trader who witnessed the incident had posted a short clip online during the night. The video was shaky, not perfect, but clear enough. It showed Lewis inside the pit. It showed Johnson pointing. It showed Noah stepping forward in uniform. And it showed the moment the police arrived. The caption read, "CEO pushes old veteran into gutter in Ikeja." Within hours, thousands had seen it. By noon, hundreds of thousands. People argued in comment sections. Some were angry, some were shocked. Some simply watched quietly, remembering how often elderly people were treated without respect. At the police station, an officer walked into the investigation room holding his phone. "Sir, you need to see this." He placed it on the table. The video played. The room went quiet. The senior officer sighed slowly. This case just became public. Across the hall, Johnson sat in a chair, still wearing yesterday's suit. His tie was loose now. His confidence had faded like paint under rain. His phone had been returned briefly for legal calls. It would not stop ringing. Investors, partners, board members. Every call sounded the same. "What happened? Is this real? Explain yourself." Johnson wiped sweat from his forehead. "It's exaggerated," he insisted into one call. "Social media always twists things." But the silence from the other end told him something was wrong. Very wrong. Noah stood beside his father near the parking area. Lewis looked fresh now, wearing clean clothes Noah had brought from home. But his eyes still carried the heaviness of yesterday. People passing by recognized Noah's uniform. Some nodded respectfully. One young boy whispered to his mother, "That's the soldier from the video." Lewis noticed. He shifted uncomfortably. He had never liked attention. "I don't want fame from this," Lewis murmured. Noah placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You won't get fame. You'll get justice." Lewis watched cars pass slowly. "You know," he said after a pause, "when I was your age, we were trained never to embarrass civilians. Uneven enemies deserved dignity." Noah listened carefully. Lewis continued softly, "That young man, he looked powerful, but he looked empty." Noah didn't answer immediately, because deep down he agreed. Johnson's lawyer arrived late morning. Barrister Kunle Adeyinka was calm, experienced and direct. He sat across from Johnson, folding his hands. "Tell me the truth," the lawyer said. Johnson leaned forward urgently. It was nothing serious. Just an argument. The lawyer played the viral video. Johnson watched himself on screen. The smirk, the pointing finger, the words. Kunle sighed deeply. "This is bad." Johnson frowned. "It's just social media drama." "No," the lawyer corrected gently. "This is evidence." Johnson's confidence cracked slightly. "You can fix it," Johnson said quickly. "I'll apologize. I'll pay compensation." The lawyer shook his head. "This is no longer private. The victim is a decorated veteran. The complainant is a military captain. And now the public is watching." Johnson swallowed. "So what happens?" The lawyer paused before answering. "You are being charged formally with assault." Johnson's stomach dropped. "Assault," he repeated weakly. "Yes." Johnson leaned back slowly. For the first time, he realized money might not solve this. Years earlier, Johnson had not been cruel. Few people knew that. He grew up in a crowded two-room apartment in Mushin. His mother sold a kara every morning. His father drove a taxi until sickness took him early. Johnson had sworn one thing as a boy: "I will never be poor again." He worked hard, scholarships, late nights, business risks. He built a company from almost nothing. And success came fast, too fast. Respect turned into fear. Confidence turned into arrogance. He stopped seeing people as equals. Drivers became obstacles, workers became tools, old men became inconveniences. Somewhere along the road, empathy disappeared. And now, sitting in a police station, Johnson faced the result of years of unchecked pride. An officer entered the room holding documents. "Mr. Johnson Adebayo," he announced formally, "you are hereby charged with assault causing harm to an elderly citizen." The words sounded heavy, real. Johnson's lawyer placed a hand on his arm. "Remain calm." Johnson nodded, but his fingers trembled slightly. He signed the papers. The officer continued, "You will appear in court tomorrow morning." Tomorrow. Everything felt too fast. Johnson asked quietly, "Can I go home?" The officer shook his head. "You will remain in custody pending court appearance." The door closed behind him, and Johnson understood something terrifying. Control had left his hands. Father and son sat together in the station waiting area. They had not spoken for several minutes. Finally, Lewis said softly, "You didn't shout at him." Noah smiled faintly. "You taught me discipline." Lewis nodded. Then he asked something unexpected. "Did I fail him?" Noah looked confused. "Who?" "That young man," Lewis replied. "Maybe nobody corrected him when he was younger." Noah thought about it. Maybe Lewis was right. Cruelty rarely appears suddenly. It grows slowly when nobody stops it. "No," Noah said gently. "You didn't fail him. His choices brought him here." Lewis sighed. "Odd, I just wish the world remembered kindness faster than punishment." Noah looked toward the interrogation room where Johnson sat alone. Sometimes punishment is the only language pride understands. News stations picked up the story. Radio hosts debated it. Television panels discussed respect for elders. Johnson's company headquarters received reporters at the gate. Employees whispered nervously. Shareholders requested emergency meetings. One major investor sent a short message: "We are suspending negotiations until legal matters are resolved." Another followed. Then another. Johnson's assistant, who once defended him fiercely, switched off his phone and avoided interviews. Success, Johnson realized later, had many friends. But scandal walked alone. Before leaving the station for the night, Noah helped his father stand. Lewis looked tired, but calmer. "You did well," Lewis told him. Noah shook his head. "I only did what any son should do." Lewis smiled faintly. "No," he said. "Many sons would have shouted. You chose patience." They walked slowly toward the exit. Behind them, officers prepared Johnson's transfer to holding overnight. Johnson caught sight of Lewis passing. Their eyes met briefly. Lewis did not look angry. He did not look proud. He simply looked sad. And strangely, that hurt Johnson more than arrest, because anger could be fought. But disappointment? Disappointment stayed. Johnson lay awake again in the cell. He finally whispered to himself, "How did it get this far?" No answer came, only the echo of muddy water, and a calm voice saying, "Step back." For the first time in years, Johnson wondered if success had quietly turned him into someone he never planned to become. Outside, Lagos traffic hummed through the night. Inside, tomorrow's court case waited. And tomorrow would decide whether Johnson's fall was temporary, or the beginning of losing everything. The courtroom was already full before proceedings began. Journalists filled the back seats. Law students whispered to each other. Ordinary citizens came because they had watched the video online and wanted to see justice with their own eyes. Johnson walked in between two police officers. His shoulders were still straight, but the confidence he once carried like armor was gone. His black suit looked smaller somehow, as if reality had pressed down on him overnight. He avoided eye contact. Across the room, Lewis sat quietly beside Noah. Lewis wore a simple native outfit now, clean, respectful. His walking stick rested gently against his chair. He looked calm, but his fingers moved slowly over the wood, an old habit from years of discipline and patience. Noah sat upright in his military uniform, still, focused, protective. When Johnson finally glanced up and saw them, his eyes lingered on Lewis. For a moment, guilt flickered across his face, then disappeared behind nervous pride. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The room fell silent. Case number 417, the clerk announced. State versus Johnson Adebayo. Johnson swallowed. His lawyer rose first. My lord, the defendant pleads guilty and wishes to express remorse. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Johnson stood slowly, and his voice trembled despite his effort to sound confident. My lord, I made a mistake. I lost my temper. I never intended serious harm. I deeply apologize to Mr. Lewis and his family. The judge studied him carefully. Then the prosecution played the video. The screen showed everything: the shove, the fall, the smirk, the words, "Stay there inside the pit." The courtroom grew heavy with silence. Some people shook their heads. Others looked away. Johnson lowered his gaze. The judge turned toward Lewis. Sir, the judge asked gently, do you wish to speak? Lewis stood slowly. The room respected the effort it took him to rise. He spoke calmly, his voice soft but clear. I have faced enemies in war, Lewis said, but yesterday hurt more, because it came from my own people. He paused. I forgive him, Lewis added quietly. Gasps moved through the courtroom. Johnson looked up quickly, shocked. Lewis continued, but forgiveness does not remove responsibility. Respect must be learned. Noah watched his father with quiet pride. The judge nodded thoughtfully. After a long pause, he delivered the ruling. Mr. Johnson Adebayo, this court recognizes your guilty plea. However, your actions showed cruelty toward an elderly citizen and a decorated veteran. Society must understand that power does not excuse abuse. The courtroom held its breath. You are hereby sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. The gavel struck. Johnson froze. 5 years. The words echoed loudly in his mind. His lawyer closed his eyes briefly. Behind him, reporters rushed to send updates. Johnson turned toward Lewis again, desperation now replacing arrogance. I'm sorry, he whispered. Lewis simply nodded. Police officers stepped forward. Handcuffs clicked again. As Johnson was led away, his phone, held by an officer, lit up repeatedly. Messages flooded in, deals cancelled, investors withdrawing, meetings suspended. His empire was already shaking. And as the courtroom doors closed behind him, Johnson realized something terrifying. The pit he pushed another man into was now the same pit swallowing his own life. 5 years is a long time. Long enough for buildings to rise, long enough for friendships to fade, long enough for a proud man to sit alone with his thoughts. The prison gate creaked open early on a quiet morning. Johnson stepped out carrying a small black bag. No convoy, no assistants, no photographers. Just one man and the weight of everything he had lost. His company was barely surviving. Most investors had pulled out after the sentencing. The board had replaced him within months. His name, once respected in business circles, now came with whispers. He looked older, not from age alone, from reflection. Meanwhile, life had moved forward for Lewis. He sat outside his modest home in Sur-Alaire, watching children play football on the dusty street. His walking stick rested beside him, but his back seemed straighter these days, not because the fall had not hurt, but because justice had been done. Noah, now promoted to a higher rank, visited often. He never mentioned the case unless his father did. They preferred peace. But the world had not forgotten. The video still existed online. It was shown sometimes during discussions about respect and responsibility. That afternoon, Johnson walked slowly toward a familiar street, Sur-Alaire, and he had rehearsed this moment many times inside prison walls. He stopped in front of Lewis's gate. His hands trembled slightly before he knocked. Lewis himself opened the door. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Johnson bowed his head. I came to say sorry, he said quietly. No cameras, no audience, no pride, just truth. Lewis studied him carefully. The arrogance was gone. The smirk was gone. Only humility remained. Come inside, Lewis said gently. They sat across from each other. Johnson swallowed. Prison teaches you something strange. It removes noise. You start hearing your own thoughts clearly. I kept hearing my voice, saying those words. Lewis nodded slowly. Johnson continued, I thought success made me powerful, but I was weak. I needed people to fear me. Lewis leaned back slightly. Power without character destroys itself, he said softly. Johnson looked up, eyes wet. I lost almost everything. Lewis replied calmly, sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you truly are. Silence filled the room, not heavy, not tense, just real. After a moment, Lewis stood. I forgave you 5 years ago, he said, but forgiveness does not erase consequence. You must rebuild. Differently. Johnson nodded. He understood. As he stepped outside again, the street felt different. Children ran past him laughing. Life had continued. And for the first time in many years, Johnson did not feel above anyone. He felt equal, small, human. If you like this story, comment, share and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.